Welcome to the Daily Objective, day 91 of the war in Israel. I'm joined by Morgan. Hey, Morgan, how's it going?
Not too bad, Razzie. How are you?
Good. Today we're talking about the West Bank. The West Bank is kind of the forgotten part of this war, and I'm going to start before we get into the details with Israel's declared goal at the start of this war, which was to eliminate Hamas. We've spoken about how in previous rounds um, against Hamas after they fired rockets, after they kidnapped and killed civilians. Uh, Israel never declared that as a goal. The goal was, to cause them setbacks or whatever. Now the goal was to eliminate Hamas. You cannot eliminate Hamas without a serious operation in the West Bank because Hamas has a strong presence in the West Bank. It is not the ruling, it's not ruling that area, but it is very much present there. We saw after the accident suffered by Hamas deputy leader al-Aruri in Lebanon that uh, Palestinians in the West Bank and in multiple cities went out and protested and declared their intention to retaliate. Now, the goal, I don't know if you remember this. Actually, you may have been too young to remember this, but Obama had this red line when it came to Syria.
How would you think I am, Razzie? That I can't remember Obama.
Well, this particular thing was, I don't know if you remember the red line, but his red line, I looked this up, so I have the exact quote somewhere here. So the red line, Obama's red line was, this is the quote, a red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized. And this was in relation to the Assad regime. Very shortly thereafter, chemical weapons were used. Now, whether or not Obama should have made that statement, gotten involved in any way, that's irrelevant. If you state that this is your goal and then you backtrack, you are showing weakness. Obama showed weakness to the world, made America look weaker than he already has, and then that his predecessor George W. Bush had, and generally America for decades had been getting weaker and weaker. I think that was a red line of sorts in that sense. Israel not operating in the West Bank is a statement. Now, I've said I think the goal to eliminate Hamas is should not be the goal of the war. It's a part of the overall goal, which is to defeat the Palestinians, to eliminate the threat coming from the Palestinians, and to eliminate it from where any other Iranian proxies, and ideally from Iran itself. Morgan, your initial thoughts about the West Bank and what Israel should do there, if anything.
Yeah. So I guess I'm going to sound a bit like a stuck record, but it's something that I've been struck by since the conflict broke out, which was a essential unseriousness about people in the West primarily, about their attitude towards the conflict, and about the fact that this is a cyclical conflict, which has broken out every few years for quite a long time now. And what I found quite edifying was that if at least one good thing came from October 7th, there was an attitude that this couldn't happen again, that finally something was going to be done. This no more October 7th would happen, despite what the Hamas guys said. And of course, it isn't just like Hamas are the only people who would like to do something like October 7th. It's a very unfortunate thing that Israel is situated in a place in the world where it is surrounded by people who would like to do this kind of thing. And Israel has to think very, very carefully about who those people are who would like to do that. And so in the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority is ruled by Mahmoud Abbas, who's the head of Fatah. And it was only in September last year, I think it was, shortly before October 7th, a few weeks before, that there was, outcry about the fact that he had given a speech to the members of Fatah saying that the Holocaust happened not because of anti-Semitism, but that Hitler killed the Jews of Germany for their social role, by which he meant money lending. So, the traditional thing, Jews are evil because they engage in usury. So this is a horrible anti-Semitic guy who's ruling the extent to which there is a government in the West Bank. And we were talking on the show the other day about the role in which anti-Semitism plays in motivating October 7th, and that people who not just the people who stormed the border on October 7th, but people who hold anti-Semitic attitudes are culpable for what happened, and also people who didn't stand up and do something about anti-Semitic attitudes. Anyone who saw it and didn't do anything about it, even if they themselves didn't hold those attitudes, bear some culpability for it. And so when it comes to dealing with to making sure this threat never comes up again, and Israel's never attacked like this in this way, Israel is going to have to deal with the people who hold these attitudes, and that's very clearly very deeply rooted in the West Bank. There was an interesting survey that's done by the Anti-Defamation League called, oh goodness, it's the something 100, where they do this kind of long-term survey to get a grasp of anti-Semitic attitudes in the world. And for the section that's titled Middle East and North Africa, they've surveyed 275 million people, so a large amount of that population. And they found that of the 275 million people surveyed, 200 million would take the majority yes to the anti-Semitic kind of things on the survey, which is 75% of the population. So that's really very high. So if Israel is going to be serious about dealing with this problem long term, it has to turn its attention to the West Bank, whether that's in military action or what exactly form that takes. I don't know. But the West Bank, once Hamas is dealt with in Gaza, it isn't like suddenly peaceful reign and there will be no issues. That something is going to have to be done about these same attitudes in many other places, but one of which is the West Bank.
Yeah, thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. Willful Thinker says that what you're referring to is the ADL Global 100. This reminds me of years ago, a Lebanese friend told me, "You don't understand how much people hate the Jews in the Arab world." And I said, "No, I know. Arabs generally hate Israel, especially if they are in the Arab world." And he said, "No, you don't understand. Literally everything that happens somehow is blamed on the Jews." Arab culture is basically is filled with a unlimited number of Owen Joneses. That's how life is in those countries, and that's why so many of them are failed states, because if you don't need to solve any problems because the problems are caused by these people who you just need to kill, then that you're never gonna get anywhere. A couple of things you said that I wanted to touch on. One is the culpability of people, for example, who sit and do nothing. I mean, I don't know. So I don't know if I'd use the word culpability. I don't necessarily know that I wouldn't, but in a sense, you are responsible for your own life. And in that sense, if you know that people are doing this in your name from your city or village, and there's an armed enemy that they're attacking, and that armed enemy might say, you know what, I don't like this, I'm going to stop it. Then yeah, you are again responsible for your own life, and you suffer the consequences of your decisions. And that's back to me saying several times on shows that what I mean about nobody is innocent. None of the adults, at least, are innocent in the context of war. Something about the response. You mentioned the response in Israel, it was very, very strong, and like, we can't let this happen again. And it reminds me, and you're definitely too young to remember this, but after 9/11, there was such a response in the US. You're not too young to, I know how
But
old you are. Of
I
course
don't
you.
remember the response, but I remember 9/11. I have a whole story. I can remember the day exactly. I was 3, but I ran headfirst into a glass window and had a face full of glass. So I was in the hospital. I remember it, and we watched the towers. So I do remember it, but I don't remember the response. Anyway, go on.
By the way, I was at an airport about to board a plane when the news was on the TV in the airport. But but the response was so strong. I mean, America was united in the idea that they are gonna defeat this enemy, and that resolve cannot really be broken by the enemy. It can be broken by your own leaders. And that's what happened in America. That's what's happening within Israel. The leaders don't want to fully fight the war. George W. Bush The first people he met were the Saudis, the country that educated 15 of the 19 hijackers, that had an education system that was very anti-Western, funded by the West, pretending that the Saudis, somehow own the oil underneath their feet, even though they did nothing to uh, discover it and its usage. Yeah, that was the case then. This is the case now. And ultimately, of course, going back to 9/11, George W. Bush he saw a need somehow to build a coalition rather than say we were attacked, we are gonna fuck up whoever came for us and go ahead with it. He managed to put together a coalition against the easiest country to get a coalition around responding against. And yeah, the serious problem, and of course that war was fought with that same non-existent level of resolve and was ultimately lost. So yeah, I think this is the case in Israel. The people were very much demanding action. It took a while for the ground operation. There can be legitimate reasons for that. The legitimate reason would be if Israel hadn't really cleared the area from the air, which they didn't. But yeah, the longer this goes on, and the longer this war is fought Netanyahu style, i.e., the cowardly, we need to do what America allows us to do style, the worse it is. And of course, we're talking about the West Bank, and we're talking about defeating Hamas in the West Bank. In Israel, they're already starting to make up a list of excuses for why not to defeat Hamas in Gaza. So yeah, that's where we are.
Yeah. I guess to the culpability point, I just something that's really useful about Rand, I guess, since we are on the Ayn Rand Center UK after all, is you get a really good focus in her work, or a very insightful focus on the way in which it's people's ideas, their values, and so on, which informs their action, and that's a good explanation. And there's a way in which people in the West kind of, I guess, don't understand that point because they don't understand Rand, perhaps, or at least that's part of it. And so when I guess what I'm getting at is that when people talk about the conflict, sometimes they almost leave anti-Semitism out of their mind, as if you could declare peace and kind of negotiate with some kind of Palestinian leader, and then there would be peace forevermore, as if there isn't in anti-Semitism a whole violent premise, which is what makes this break out every few years. No matter if you get rid of Hamas, that's not really relevant. That's a particular faction that embodies this problem. So there's a much more kind of fundamental issue, I guess. And to the culpability, I mean, I don't think it's controversial. The idea that, there's the quote, it's from some theologian, that all that's necessary for the triumph of evil, or is it from Edmund Burke? All that's necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. So,
I think the original quote was good men, but now we're supposed to say people. So
there you go. And if for the Palestinians who are better out there, who may be in the West Bank, if to the extent that they heard anti-Semitic remarks being taught to children, or heard slurs being spoken, all this kind of stuff, that kind of stuff is the drip, drip, drip that leads to October 7th, right? And to the extent that they did nothing about it, or agreed with it, or pushed it out of mind, whatever, they are culpable for it. Or at least I think if any reasonable person in that position would feel a kind of guilt about the fact of having not done anything about it, I guess. Anyway, and ultimately, I guess I'm getting to the point that fundamentally, the problem is much wider than Hamas, which is why the West, we're talking about the West Bank, but also it's wider than that. It isn't like suddenly you get to the border with Jordan and these opinions go away either. So there's a big problem, and I find frustrating, as I keep saying, is that people in the West don't want to think about that.
yeah, Douglas in the chat says ISIS hit Iran, give the Jews a break. Yeah, that sounds like something the Jews would say, if I may say so. Yeah, but ISIS took responsibility for that, and of course, the people. I actually went to Jeremy Corbyn's Twitter to see if he tweeted anything before ISIS took responsibility. This was one of the rare times that he didn't immediately blame the Jews. Also, I saw this. on this issue of, if you do grow up in such a society. I saw this thing that a viewer of the channel shared on Facebook of Enes Freedom, the basketball player from Turkey, who said how he arrived in the US, 18 or 19-year-old basketball player, and uh, you know forget what exactly he said, but something like his mother gave him the advice of always never hate somebody until they've given you a reason to hate them, or something to that effect. And he said, he met a Jewish person and they invited him to their home for dinner, and then his immediate reaction was no. And then he said, okay, there's no, they haven't given me a reason to hate them, so I'm going to go. And he said, I called a friend before that and said, if you don't hear from me in 2 hours, call the police. And and of course today he is one of the world's great freedom fighters. And but yeah, that's, if you are raised to hate Jews, it's going to be difficult to undo that, but it is on you. And the older you are, the more you've lived, the more you've experienced life, and experienced that people have free will. There are good and bad people in any society, and if you continue to believe that, it is absolutely on you. Um, I want to say, uh, yes, Douglas, you can cancel a membership anytime. It is monthly, and if you cancel it, yeah. And by the way, for everybody else, if you like our content, want to support our work, want access to more of what we do, uh, you can buy a membership. By the way, I might as well pitch before I go back to what's happening in the West Bank right now. That members at the platinum level and above, that is not a cheap one. It's £50 for the platinum membership and
No,
more.
that's it's very affordable, very nicely priced.
It is. I think it's worth more than it costs. And tomorrow we have the return of the ARCUK Philosophy Forum, and for the new year, that's going to become a weekly thing. One of the things we're going to discuss is the Republican primaries, which is also going to be the topic of Monday's reality show. That's going to be the ARCUK Republican primary debate. I think we're going to probably alienate some people, but that's what we do. Hopefully we're gonna convince some people to see how we come at this from a different perspective. Yeah. So back to after that commercial break, back to what's going on. So there are some ground operations in the West Bank by Israel, and it's kind of pinpoint operations. There's of course more going on, more attempts on the Palestinian side to ignite the situation, as there is not as much as there is in southern Lebanon, because they don't have the capabilities of Hezbollah. But there is uh, some stuff going on there, and but yeah, it's it's insufficient, and it's reminiscent of Gaza. It's, let's do whatever we can. My only explanation is whatever we can get away with politically, whatever we can get away with diplomatically, whatever won't piss off America too much. Let's do that. And if another October 7th happens, then we can go in and go further towards the goal, which we're not going to achieve because they're going to stop us before we get there, of eliminating the enemy.
I mean, so I feel bad for Israel in lots of ways because, well, for numerous reasons, but they're actually, as unfortunate as it is to say, more determined than a lot of governments around the world to be decisive about these kind of things. And yet, of course, they're also clearly insufficiently decisive to go through with a lot of this stuff. And they also have a lot of bad faith allies in the case of the US and the UK, unfortunately, who really could do far, far more to back them up in going through with this, and actually very often are actively undermining them. So despite all the problems that are kind of internal to Israel, with maybe feeling too much guilt about doing what's necessary to finish the conflict, or to see things through, they've also got all this outside pressure raining down on them, as if that other stuff wasn't enough. So I feel sorry for them sometimes, and because also they put out people to go bat for them in the press, like Elon Levy or Mark Regev, who really stand up there and put forward a reasonably good moral case for Israel. It might not be perfect, but they really go out there and speak far better on their country's behalf than most diplomats do for other countries. So anyway, losing my train of thought a little bit.
Well, thanks, Douglas, for becoming a YouTube member. I also, I don't like acknowledging trolls in the chat, but whenever somebody uses the word genocide, this is off topic, but it's worth mentioning because again, a show without an Owen Jones mention, well, there already was one, but why not another one? You may have seen these things on Twitter where the IDF shows a soldier and they're talking or smoking a cigarette and then blowing up a tunnel behind them and you see the explosives and everything. So Owen Jones tweeted one of those and and used the word genocide. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he basically used that as an example of genocide. Now, of course, those tunnels, unfortunately, Israel makes sure, as far as I know, pretty much makes sure nobody's there. And certainly, if there are explosives in there, Hamas would know and get out. So it literally is an explosion of a tunnel that is only used for the purpose to further the purpose of murdering Jews. So making it within the definition, the Owen Jones definition of genocide. This is important, people. He is prominent. This is why we're talking about him. Within the Owen Jones definition of genocide is any attempt to make it more difficult for Hamas to achieve their goal of exterminating the Jews. That's there's no other way to see that. If anybody sees that another way, let me know in the chat, or Morgan, if you see a way to explain Owen Jones's view of this as anything other than the way I've explained it. Let me know.
I mean, I think if you want to explain Owen Jones, you would have to be perhaps a professional psychologist, I suspect. No, there is no way to explain that. As I keep saying on the show, and again, I'll sound like a stuck record, people use the word genocide in the context of this discussion with Israel with immense portent and kind of with immense context to it, because of course, why was Israel founded in 1948? Why did the UN finally decide to go do that? It was because of the aftermath of World War II and what happened. And so when people accuse Israel of genocide, it's with that knowledge in mind, and it's to make it sting. And that's not, and it's not because Israel is doing that, because Israel isn't committing genocide, but they don't care about that. They'll throw the word out there anyway, and it's immensely disgusting and insulting to anyone with good taste, which is not what Owen Jones is. And the way you get to be like someone like Owen Jones is the same way you get to be someone like Cenk Uygur. You get to be like that through being very, very tribal. There was a debate I saw with Cenk recently that he did with the lefty YouTuber Destiny. And it was amazing how reasonable Destiny came across. He's one of these bread tube guys, so I wouldn't really agree with at all. But Cenk just comes across as completely deranged. And the way you get to that point is perhaps through a measure of unintelligence, but also through Destiny is not bread tube. I think Destiny is bread tube. That's what Daniel's telling me. Anyway, you get through there through a measure of unintelligence, but you also get there through a measure of having drunk the Kool-Aid for so long that that's how you end up. Daniel's having a go at me live on the show.
This is why when I say you're too young for something, I'm too old to know what bread tube is. But I will maybe search it on Alta Vista. But
it's lefty YouTubers who've named themselves after Kropotkin's conquest of bread.
All right, sounds interesting enough to not have to search on Alta Vista. Douglas, Owen Jones shouldn't use words in a sentence if he doesn't know the meaning of the word. That's the thing here. This is not, there are things that you can say if you're a teenager who's been encouraged to has certain ideas put in his head and is going out and marching in the streets. It's different if you're an intellectual. Owen Jones is an intellectual. He's not a stupid person. He knows exactly what genocide means. He knows also in the context of this conflict that there is an attempted genocide, and Israel's military action is an attempt to prevent that genocide. He knows that, and he is intentionally promoting ideas that contradict that. So yeah, this is not stupidity. It is pure evil.
Yeah, and the best case that you could put forward for it is that it's that he's deliberately um, letting his focus go funny when it's coming to calling Israel genocidal. That's the best case, and in all likelihood, it's actually much worse than that. It's more closer to what you're saying. But so, if that's the best case, then what he's doing is still evil. There, there is no justification for it, and it's so relentless and it's so particular from Owen Jones that there is no excuse for it. Or from any of these other people. Again, you can bring up the Young Turks in this context as well. They're awful. They're even worse, to be honest.
Yeah, and with Cenk Uygur as well. This is his this is his brand. Cenk Uygur is super popular because of his brand of an angry leftist who doesn't actually delve deeply into anything. And yeah, the show I did with Mark about Cenk Uygur, Mark was optimistic that maybe Douglas changed Cenk's mind. I don't think his mind is could be changed because he does know better. But the brand is working for him, and so he will not. I don't think he will change his ways.
I think the way that you end up as one of these people is that you go into it with with the with the goal of defending, the lefty position or whatever it is, right? And so then you form your whole understanding of the history to the extent that you do, and your line of argument basically with validating your tribe's side of things. And so therefore, you get these kind of really weird lines of argument from Cenk about, and he'll talk about 1948 and all that kind of stuff, and he'll come out with these utterly bizarre, detached views about it. And the only way you get there is from having, from the beginning, thought, I need to be lefty about this, or I need to be whatever. And so therefore, he sounds quite sincere when he's talking, although he also sounds, again, completely stupid. He does this thing which he's done for years and years and years, which is where he'll repeat the opponent's view back to them in a kind of stupid tone of voice. And you kind of think, well, this is the guy who's running for president of America. Although I suppose it doesn't actually take very much to be the president of America nowadays. This is the guy who gets an awful lot of views, has an awful lot of subscribers, and it's immensely unimpressive. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Cenk Uygur.
Yeah, since we're out of time, I want to quickly comment. Yeah, Christopher, I don't know what was going on behind me, but yeah, another reason to support ARCUK so that our offices can be such that random people's angry conversations are not a part of our content. And yeah, to the people, I've heard this a lot in recent weeks. Call it Judea and Samaria. I do often refer to it as Judea and Samaria. When we have a title for a YouTube video, we want people who might not necessarily agree with us to click it and hear what we have to say. And it's unfortunate that it is the West Bank of the Jordan River. Now, there's a reason it's referred to it as the West Bank, and yeah, but yeah, there is a context here, and I stand by the decision to have a title. The West Bank must be next, and not Judea and Samaria must be next. And
Yeah,
what definitely must be next is the reality show starting in a minute. Morgan, you are joining me on that, as is Jonathan Honig and Kirk Wilcox. So thanks everybody for watching. The reality show, if you're watching live, starts in a minute. We'll see you there. Bye.